An arrest underscoring just how dangerous the threat to this week's inauguration here in Washington has now become. That inauguration just 4 days away. 25,000 U.S. military personnel, troops from the National Guard have descended on Washington, D.C. to try to keep it safe. But even that number, we're told, may not necessarily be enough. Let's get right to the nation's capital. Shimon Prokopez is on the scene for us. Jeremy Diamond is over at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue at the White House. Shimon, there's very disturbing breaking news unfolding right now about a serious arrest here in the nation's capital. Tell us what we know.
Yeah, so that arrest, Wolf, happening by the Capitol Police, where it happened on the North Capitol side. And what we've learned is that a man driving a pickup truck came up to a checkpoint. Many checkpoints set up all across Washington, D.C. He drove up to this checkpoint and he displayed what appeared to be a fake inauguration pass, some kind of inaugural credential that the officials, the police there, realized were fake. They then also saw some indications that perhaps he had some weapons in the vehicle. They questioned this man. His name is Wesley Allen Beeler. He is from Virginia. And when they questioned the man, he said he had weapons in the car. And so they found a 9mm Glock. Most concerning, they also found over 500 rounds of ammunition, some of it belonging to that weapon, others having to do with a rifle or something like that. Obviously, what's very concerning for authorities here, Wolf, is that he had this fake inaugural credential, and that is something that, of course, investigators are still trying to determine what was going on here. But we just have this basic information that he had this fake inaugural credential and that he had a weapon on him, and police arrested him. We don't know what he was doing in the area. We don't know why he came here. The fact that he tried to drive through this checkpoint is certainly concerning for authorities, and thankfully they have had these checkpoints set up. Whether or not he poses any kind of threat, we have still yet to hear from authorities. The Capitol Police arrested him, and that investigation is still underway, Wolf.
Well, set the scene for us, Shimon. What's going on here in Washington, not just around the U.S. Capitol, but all the Washington Mall is shut down, Lincoln Memorial, all the way over to the White House. All the bridges, basically, from Virginia into Washington have been shut down. But just give our viewers here in the United States and around the world a sense of the tense situation that has already developed, and certainly this arrest is going to make it even more tense.
Yeah, it is a tense situation, and it is a very strong military presence. 25,000 troops on the grounds of Washington, D.C., military vehicles everywhere. As you know, driving into the office, driving into the bureau, every block you go, you will see a military vehicle. You will see heavily armed National Guard troops. So we're on the roof now here, Wolf, outside the Capitol. I wanted to show you just some of what is going on inside the Capitol. This is probably the most secure area in Washington, D.C. right now. The inaugural stage is just here in front of us, and around us is all this extra fencing with the razor wires. This is the most secure area, and this is where a lot of the dignitaries will be gathered on Inauguration Day. So you could see why they've set up this extra fencing all around. This is the first time that we have gotten such a close look inside at the Capitol here. There are National Guards all over here surrounding the Capitol from the east side to the west side, across every street. And there are also these trucks. We've been seeing these military trucks all over Washington, D.C. And today, I have seen even more troops arriving by the busload coming here. Just a short time ago, we saw dozens of troops walking in towards the Capitol. But they are keeping this place so secure. And the perimeter, most important right now for authorities, that is the priority. The priority for authorities is to keep the perimeter secure, and that is why we're seeing all the vehicles, the military personnel outside of this area. There's a lot of concern about vehicles, or whether or not people can use vehicles and place them on streets and then store equipment, whether it's weapons or even bombs. There are concerns, obviously, as we've been reporting, for IEDs. And the concern is warranted because, remember, on the day of this attack, of the insurrection, Police found 11 Molotov cocktails inside a car. There were 2 pipe bombs as well that were set to explode and for whatever reason did not. There is also concern that some of the bats and the sledgehammers and some of the equipment that the mob used to break into the Capitol was being stored in vehicles. So what authorities are doing is they're surrounding this entire area with trucks and barriers to keep vehicles away. You can walk through this area. The Secret Service actually, Wolf, today set up magnetometers, screening areas, so that if you want to get closer to this area, you can. You just have to go through magnetometers. That's what we did to get over here so that we could show you this view. It is the most secure area. Certainly, I've covered many events. I was in New York after 9/11. I have never, ever seen anything like this. It is, in some ways, you know, anxiety-inducing because you're driving around what does not feel like a street in the United States. It really feels like perhaps you're somewhere like in the Middle East or something. To see this many military personnel on the streets of a U.S. city is certainly striking. And the concern, Wolf, is warranted. There are threats. There are major threats. And, of course, the key thing for authorities here is to make sure that there is a peaceful transfer of power. And that's what this is all about. And with the threats that keep on coming in, and you're hearing this from the FBI, you're hearing this from the Secret Service, that the chatter is just nonstop, that they have not seen a level of chatter concerning domestic terrorism like this. This is unprecedented. So that is why, Wolf, we are seeing this level of security all over Washington, D.C.
All right, Shimon, I want you to stand by. I want to head over to the other end of Pennsylvania. Jeremy Diamond is over at the White House. All these major streets, Jeremy, as you know, Shimon knows, whether Pennsylvania Avenue or Independence or Constitution, all those areas have been totally shut down, blocked off. You can't drive around any of those areas right now out of deep security concerns. Tell us what's going on where you are. We clearly, Jeremy, haven't seen President Trump since Tuesday. What is he doing this weekend with 4 days left in his presidency?
Yeah, well, Wolf, I can tell you there's an equally wide perimeter, security perimeter around the White House as well, very similar to what Shimon was just describing. As for the president himself, he has no events on his public schedule for what will be the final weekend of his presidency. But what we do know is that the president has been consumed with the unraveling of his presidency. We have seen several senior White House officials, including Jared Kushner and Stephen Miller, both arriving at the West Wing this morning, which is unusual for a quiet Saturday like today. We don't know exactly what they are doing here, but preparations are being made for the final days of the president's time in office, and in particular for his send-off. The president is now expected to leave Washington for his Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach on Wednesday morning. So on the very same inauguration day, President Trump expected to leave early in the morning, and what he is demanding, according to our sources, is a fairly large send-off, a military-style send-off with all of the pomp and circumstance of a state visit, perhaps for a visiting foreign dignitary, and also a large crowd of supporters. Now, whether or not that happens at the White House or at Joint Base Andrews, where the president will hop on Air Force One for the last time, remains to be seen. But clearly, that is something that the president is looking for. What remains unclear is whether the president will deliver any kind of farewell remarks. That is very typical for a departing president, to deliver some kind of speech touting their accomplishments, trying to cement their legacy, or frame it at least in the way that they would like the public to see it. So far, the president has seemed disinterested by aides, pleased with him for him to do something like that. Whether he ultimately decides to do that in the next couple of days remains to be seen. But certainly, Wolf, the president is looking to leave Washington in style and making a big exit. Whether anything else around that happens as well, we'll have to wait and see.
All right, Jeremy, I know you're working your sources over at the White House. Shimon's working his sources in law enforcement. We're going to get back to both of you. But right now, I'm joined by President Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton. His best-selling new book is entitled The Room Where It Happened, a White House Memoir. Ambassador Bolton, thanks so much for joining us. As you just heard, we're learning these very disturbing details about this Virginia man stopped with a gun, fake inauguration credentials, lots of rounds of ammunition. What does that tell you about the severity of the potential threats just ahead of this inauguration?
Well, I think it certainly demonstrates the need for the security that's out there, and that in this case, the good news is that it worked. Obviously, this has to be investigated further, but the levels of security we're seeing are obviously a reaction to the catastrophic failures of security on January the 6th, underestimating the threat, not paying adequate attention to the intelligence, clearly not being ready in terms of resources or communications. And so I think both on the military and the law enforcement side, nobody wants to make that mistake in connection with the inauguration. We'll have to see what this means. I mean, I think the weaponry obviously of concern, but really the fact somebody's wandering around with fake credentials is definitely troubling, because I don't think this guy made them up on his own, and they need to find out where he got them, who he's associated with, and all the implications for that.
Yeah, if it was just him, that's one thing. But if there are plenty of others with weapons and ammunition, obviously a very disturbing development indeed. We know, Ambassador, that some of these alleged Capitol rioters who have been arrested have very strong ties to white supremacy. You served as President Trump's national security advisor. Do you believe he has actually emboldened these groups?
I don't think there's any question about it. I think when you have a president who for 2 straight months, and really even before the election, lies about what happened and promotes this complete fantasy that the election was stolen, it's entirely predictable that extremists will seize on it. They're extremists on both sides of the spectrum. And I think the way we saw Donald Trump behave on January the 6th shows he understood exactly what he intended, and it resulted in the mayhem in the Capitol and five dead. So I do put this squarely at Trump's feet. I think he is responsible, and I think it's because of his conduct and his words, consciously forwarding a narrative that he knew could not be true.
So do you believe he has blood on his hands?
I think the effect is clear, yes. And I think if there's trouble on Inauguration Day, that will be a second-order effect of it. Trump is a person without scruples and without character. It's one of the reasons that I thought he was unfit to be president, and one of the things that I think all Americans should focus on in their election evaluation going forward, both what people believe and also the critical question, do they have civic virtue? Do they have character?
I know they're looking at individuals who may have incited the deadly violence that erupted up on Capitol Hill last week. But do you think the President of the United States, soon to be the former President of the United States, should actually be potentially criminally charged, whether by the Attorney General of the District of Columbia or the federal government, for that matter, the Justice Department?
Well, I think people ought to be serious and completely non-political in evaluating that question. I think the worst thing that could happen would be to overhype Trump's criminal liability and turn him into a martyr. That just makes things worse. I think an objective evaluation by law enforcement, standards for the Department of Justice to indict are very high here, what they have to prove and in court beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think that's the way to look at it. I think Trump needs to worry as much about potential civil liability coming out of the events of January the 6th because of potential wrongful death actions and other civil penalties that could be very severe.
Ambassador Bolton, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be with you.